I'd like to call the Committee on Budget and Appropriations to order at 5 o'clock. Here we are, the last night of budget hearings. So thank you again for everyone who's been here throughout this process. Tonight we have the collector on page 14, personnel on page 51, recreation on page...
Personnel's on page 16, I believe.
So I was only fooling. Personnel's on page 16. Recreation's 55. Let's see. Forestry is 59.
57.
What did you just tell
But isn't Parks 57?
Park and Forestry is 57. Animal Control is 38. Library is 53.
Assessors 11, police 25.
You got it.
Okay.
So we're starting
If that's our biggest snafu tonight, we're in good
Hey,
shape.
we're done here.
All right. Well, tonight we have Deb Macaccio, the collector, with us. So, Deb, nice to see you as always.
Thank you.
So here's the way we've been doing this so far over the last couple weeks. Is we've just given the opportunity for the department head to explain their budget to us, anything that they think is important for us to know. Then we'll open up to questions, and Deb's had some questions, the council's had some questions. Councilor Kobus will be running late this evening. He's my vice chair. Councilor Conti will not be in attendance, so Vice President Parika will be my second until then. So. If everyone wants to join us on page 14, Deb, the floor is yours.
Okay. My budget obviously is for salary and wages and longevity for staff. I've also inside my budget have the supplies for the office. Postage is for the mailing of the tax bills, the mailing of the utility bills, which are done directly from my office. The excise tax bills are mailed directly through the deputy collector, Kelly and Ryan, and they are reimbursed for the costs for mailing out the first round and as well as demands. The warrant bills we do not pay postage on. They also have printing and reproduction, which is the cost of paper to print the bills on. The envelopes, the return envelopes, the special paper that we use for municipal lien certificates. That basically covers that. Then I have the advertising, the recordings, and also would be oh God, I just drew a total blank. But when I do tax title, when I'm doing my tax title process, I have to pay for the advertising for the Sun Chronicle, for the legal ad. I have to, the documents all have to be recorded within 60 days at the Registry of Deeds, which comes under recordings. That's basically it for the cost for tax title. That's done every year. November is always the first Wednesday in November is tax taking date. Then the other process I have is the banking services, and that consists of Unibank, where we provide the residents with the cost of their ACH online payment. That basically, in a nutshell, is what I have in my budget.
Everything seems really kind of flat and straightforward. Deb, I don't know if you have any questions?
Of course.
I know.
Debbie, your postage, current for the year, everything is either paid out or committed to the post office, I believe, in purchase orders. You only have $1,600 in unencumbered POs. This is not in front of the council. I have it.
Yep.
Are you gonna, do you think you have enough postage?
I'm going to use it.
I know you're going to use
I'm
it. Do you have
very
enough
tight.
for the year with 63?
It's going to be very tight. I'm watching it very closely right now to make sure that I have enough funding that I can split it. I have to split it between a purchase order that I have for the United States Post Office and for Kelly and Ryan. And I still have one more commitment to come out on Kelly and Ryan, and I just don't know how many people are going to be getting bills before the fiscal year ends.
Yeah.
That I got to make sure I have enough to cover that. I'm working diligently with them to try to see if I can find out when that commitment's coming out.
So postage is level funded into fiscal 2019, and I think we're going to be close in 18. So
I have a feeling that I'm going to be saying something next year that I'm going to need more money because it's close. It's I can't predict it because
Sure.
it changes constantly. If you have people that make payments 2 quarters and they're paying a quarter ahead, then I don't have to mail in the second bill because it's a zero balance bill and we don't mail zero balance bills for taxes. But with all the building we have going on, with the new condos and more building, you have more and more bills that have to go out. I'm required to send them out by law. You also have water bills that's going to increase as well. So now you have 2 bills instead of 1 for that resident who wasn't there at all. So it's always a guessing game. I'm playing it to the line as close as I can. We haven't had a funding increase in a long time for postage. So I think that this year might be tight coming up.
So that's good to know. It's good for us for planning purposes as well.
So
Sarah?
I just want to say, when you say tight, like, what are you thinking you might need? How much more would you?
how much more would I need?
Like approximate. obvious.
Approximately, I'll say $2,000.
That's great.
You know, I could be high, I could
or
be
a
a little low.
Yeah.
Sure.
In that
I'm not
range.
100% sure. It all depends because when we do bulk mailing, it starts in a 37-cent level up to the 48 or 49 cents, whatever it is, postage, depending on where you fall in there. And that is determined by the postal data software that we run our bills through to determine what we have lived up to what the post office requires. And that is all determined by that software package. So I never know.
You can't get exact, but at least it
It's
might be around.
like shooting a
2,000.
target,
Sure. Okay,
And
great.
that target is always moving.
always moving.
Yep.
Barry's like, there we go.
What is it?
Do you have something? Is it me?
Sarah, do you have a
No,
follow-up?
I just thought I saw out
yeah.
of the corner of my eye, I thought
I
I saw
do
this.
want to just, I'm sorry, to just expound a little bit on what the city collector said, that under the, debits under the banking services, that the per transaction charge of 25 cents is paid out of the banking service line from the city when people pay by ACH online. So that's a fee that we absorb right now. I think there's some difference of opinion on where that should or shouldn't be. If it wasn't us, it would be the user.
Right.
And I think there's some discussion that will potentially take place with the administration, but right now, that's where it is. So just so everybody's aware of that.
Yeah.
Just for a moment of clarification, so for the ACH, that's like a check,
Right.
but they are charged if they use a debit card or a credit
They're
card.
charged significantly more, and that charge is borne by the
user.
of the credit card.
Correct. Okay, I just wanted to make that
So
clear.
if
So
you-
currently, it's quote unquote free to use your check, but if where the city's actually charged 25 cents per check that's processed.
If it's ACH online. So
Online,
if you
that's what I mean.
mail
Yep.
us a check in an envelope that's gonna cost you 47 cents or whatever for a stamp, you're paying more for postage, but the check, we're not gonna charge.
Right.
We don't get charged 25 cents for that check. But if you're going online and you use online bill pay,
Yeah.
we pay 25 cents for that
Okay.
as a city. So it's just something that I recently had a conversation with the budget, like, you know, I mean, Barry's like, really, Deb, you're gonna
Reckon
complain
it for the
about, I
rest of
do,
us.
I'm sorry, so I complained about the 25 cents. So just so that you're aware of that. And obviously, the budget is pretty straightforward, and
Yeah.
the other thing, just for the council to know, the recordings, the advertising, those two line items are obviously estimates based on historical activity, but that is directly related to the number of properties that would go into the lien process. So if there's a lot of properties to be liened, those costs are more. If there's fewer properties to be liened, those costs would be less, because each one requires specific.
So, and Deb, or maybe Barry's, it looks like the advertising line's down about $3,100 this year. And Deb, is that because you're forecasting potentially not as many recordings, or is that just?
No, what happens is that we start off with printing and reproduction.
Yep.
And commodity paper fluctuates constantly.
Sure.
And I have a certain amount of paper and envelopes I have to order every year because it's based on what we've printed. I keep a close count on my paper as well and my envelopes to make sure that we don't have an overabundance, but we have to make sure we have enough stock to get us through until the next order, because they usually order in September. So I have a lot of bills I still have to get out from July 1. So we watch that as well. But that commodity, because it goes all over the place, there's usually not enough money in that budget line, so I have to borrow from another budget line. So I borrow from a budget line that has an abundance of funds in it, and then I move on. And then the advertising bill comes in, and the advertising bill might be higher than, and it usually is, than what we've anticipated, and then I have to steal some money from another line for that one to cover that, because I have to pay my bill, I can't wait. And then it's November, and all of a sudden I find out, okay, this is how many actually I'm going to have that's going to go into tax title, and I don't have enough money left in that line because I've borrowed from that line, and then I have to ask the mayor for funding, and then you guys approve more money to go in my budget line. But that's the only way I survive in order to be able to do what I need within that grouping of funds. So just as an example, in 2017, I had 1,310 letters that went out as a demand because they hadn't paid their 17 taxes. By the time it went around into, and that was in July, to November, I had 118 accounts that went into tax title. So, I mean, that's a lot of work to get it down from 1,300 accounts, excuse me, but that was the best that we could do at that point. And I have much more money in there when I start, but the problem is that for all the other stuff that I have going on, that's how I've been doing it for the last several years in order to make my funds meet.
And it's worked.
It's worked.
It's worked wonderfully, so.
Yep. So, I mean, I don't have too many choices because we're level funded.
Yep. Very good. Thank you for that explanation. I think it always helps. All right, do we have anything else for the city collector? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you all.
I'm free.
All right, get out of here.
We're banking 3 minutes right now.
Wow.
This is good.
3 whole minutes.
Owen, how are you?
Very good. Good evening. Good evening.
Good to see you.
Hey, Owen.
Barry. All right, so if you guys want to join me on page 16. Owen, I think you heard the spiel I just gave, so
Correct.
If you want to introduce yourself for those that you may not know, and then we can dive right in.
Good evening, Owen Bebo, Personnel Director. Good to see everyone. The highlight of my budget is the health coverage. As you know, it's the bulk of my budget. And this year, the active plan health coverage has resulted in a 3.7% increase, which is a little bit lower than the average of the last 6 years, slightly. The average 6 years is roughly a little over 4%, so that's not too bad. And those active plans run from July 1st through September 30th. There are other plans, so you would, the active plans, I call them that, if you're an employee or if you're a retiree and under 65, you would be under those plans. When you hit 65 as a retiree, you have to sign up for Medicare, and we have 2 other plans that you would go on that would be called supplemental plans. If you go on a supplemental plan, those plans run on a calendar year. So I budgeted a 5% increase, not knowing what that increase could be. We usually look at that rate or set that rate around the fall, and we start examining those claims and the information we get from Blue Cross. So not knowing what that could be, it could be in that range. Happy to tell you the dental plan this year is at a 0% increase, which has been actually flat or a little bit below 0 for the last 3 years.
Wow.
I can tell you it's probably going to go up next year, but we've done pretty well with all this dental. In fact, we've increased coverage on it. You get a few more perks out of it with no increase, which has been great. So that's pretty much the bulk of this budget is the health plan, and that the biggest piece is the percentage increase for the active plans, which is 3.7% increase. On top of that, let's see, we also have within our workers' comp. I looked over the last few years and tried to put that in line as to what we've had. So I'm trying to keep an average of the last 5 years and trying to keep it in that. Again, that's kind of hard to judge, not knowing. You could have a bad year, you could have a good year. So those numbers reflect close to what we've averaged in the last 5 years. Everything else is pretty much flat in the budget. So really, those other ones are hard to control or are hard to judge, but based on past claims and things like that, we try to make a relatively good estimate. We get out of Blue Cross and the other factors that go along with that formula. We sit in early January with Deb and the mayor and the treasurer, and we look at that rate, see what that rate would be.
Anything?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So, just to reiterate what Owen said, so we've had multiple meetings and discussions about health insurance and the rates and all that other stuff. But Barry, Owen, and I met again today to look at, where we were in the budget and stuff. I think their estimate is as reasonable as you can get, given the information on the day you do the budget. That's, I think it's important for folks to continue to remember that anybody that has a qualifying event, they can come on to our health insurance at any time. So if you're single and you get married, that's a qualifying event. If you are married and you had your spouse's health insurance, and they lost their job, you can come onto our health insurance. So there are qualifying events that happen all of the time. So I think after the open enrollment and the rate changes and stuff like that, the activity is reasonable. I would also like to point out that the last year being the year we're in, fiscal 2018, we did have to approach the council mid-year for funds for workers' comp. So, taking an average and kind of looking at where we are, it's our best guess.
Right.
There were some unusually high workers' comp fire-related. So that's why you see the 2018 revised budget of 220 and the 100,000. That shouldn't alarm anyone. That is, the 220 was the anomaly, not the 100. Again, we could be wrong because something could happen, but that's not something that is overly concerning.
Well, to that point, Deb, same with the police, where the police has remained flat, right? So when you're talking about that 220 is the anomaly?
Yeah, but the police, at 45, they're flat.
Yeah.
And they're running okay year to date for police. Fire is 2 right now, the workers' comp fire, but there are some things that my office and the personnel office have met on. The difficulty in part with workers' comp, we're self-insured for workers' comp. So you get the voucher from cooking company and then it goes off to be evaluated. So there's some delay in the payment of the bill. So you would potentially, if you looked at the year-to-date budget report, you might say, why do they have so much money? Because there are so many unknowns with the way that workers' comp works and is processed. So,
Yeah.
It's
people
big
who see a doctor based on a workers' comp claim, those physicians, hospitals, whatever the treatment is, have to pay a DIA rate, which is Division of Industrial Accidents. So their rates are kind of set. So it's tough to sometimes get someone to accept it, and they find the right doctor to take that. So because there's the delay process involved.
Well, you're at the mercy of so many things you can't control.
It's hard. Yeah.
So, I don't want to oversimplify it, but say, but the reality is, so much of your budget is a moving target. And it's trying to get, as Deb said, the best estimate that you can.
Correct.
So, one final thing, if I may, interject, Mr. Chairman.
We've got plenty of time.
Yeah, and we've got the 3 minutes from the last meeting. So the city's self-insured for health insurance for everything except for, there's a couple of things that are listed as premium plans. So keep in mind that this is the city's matching share that will eventually go into the health insurance trust, and the health insurance trust for most of our plans are what actually pay the bills. We incur in 12 months, have to pay in 24. So there's overlap, like this, so the school right now is already participating in the 2019 rates. They're paying those into the trust. So what you have in front of you for the budget is that what essentially we would pay a private company, right? We would pay Blue Cross Blue Shield. We just happen to be self-insured, so it goes into the self-insured trust fund, and then the invoices are paid out of there. I don't know if that made it more confusing for folks or not, but it's just important to remember that this is strictly the budget.
Right. No, I think it was a good clarifying point. Julie?
Sure, I have a question. When you give, we have a new position that's coming up. I hate to do circles, so let me ask you just out. So the Economic Development Director position, is that actualized out? So in other words, if it goes into the budget this year, is it actualized out with all the benefits that would go along with that position? When you see it on the salary line?
No, the salary line is strictly the salary, not the benefits. The benefits are in the personnel department. And we don't know what this person, whether or not this person will want benefits, whether or not, which benefit this person would get. So the salary sheets that you have as part of your budget books are just the salaries.
Good. Council Holmes?
How many, just going off of what Council Hall just mentioned, how many people would you say do get hired, do take the benefits? Do you have any?
The majority will take the benefits, I would say, it's a majority of it. But then sometimes, as Deb said, it's a qualifying event. Sometimes they leave, the spouse picks it up. Sometimes they don't have it, and then they jump on because the spouse lost it. It's kind of a moving target.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As big as it is, it's really pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
a large item in the budget, we all recognize that, but
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward. It's health insurance and stuff.
And again, it's important to stress with personnel especially, there's so much that we can't control. So, and I think Owen historically have done a really nice job of getting as close to the market as we can, which is pretty remarkable in itself, so.
We try to keep it as close, but we need that just enough to get through the year.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, thank you for coming down.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. What do we have? We have Recreation page. Recreation will be on page 55. Mr. Walsh, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Self?
Oh, no complaints. So the way we've been doing this, Dennis, just so you know, is we're giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the councils you may not know, talk to us about anything that you want us to know about your budget, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay.
As you can see, it's been an arduous process, and, you know, people running over their times and everything.
I won't run over my time. Dennis Walsh, I'm the Recreation Director, and I have been so for 13 years now. And we've seen a lot of changes for the new councils. We've seen a lot of changes over those 13 years, mainly due to Mayor Dumas and the city councilors in the past allocating funds to recreation to upgrade our facilities. I kind of got involved because when my kids were playing, the fields were deplorable. And it's not that way anymore. I think Attleboro, due to the group effort, and especially the guys in my maintenance staff, we're now like one of the envious athletic recreational facilities in the area. People like to come here to Ponce and Hewitt. The girls love South Attleboro, Sagra. They have their own facility. They take great care of it. And we found that having their own facilities, they kind of will try to help maintain and make donations to kind of do things we want to do. Attleboro Youth Soccer, we have a project going on right now where Attleboro Youth Soccer contributed $15,000 towards the renovation of Tilda B. Stone. Yeah. We work very well with our youth groups. We do not, some communities do, we do not charge them a fee to use our fields, because all that would do is, if we did that, they would just increase the prices for the kids to play, and it's hard enough already for many of the kids and the families to, pay the fees. Some of the fees now are, $300, $400 to be on teams. It's expensive. So I think in the end, we find that working with them, we get probably more doing it this way, because they know they're going to get whatever they put in, they're going to get a direct positive impact on the facilities that they use. A little bit about my revolving fund, just so you know, we asked to increase that last year, and it is this year up to $200,000. Most of those fees come in, and it's grant monies that we bring in, and they go right out. We get the community development block grant that goes for our youth center, which we operate free of charge after school for kids during the school year. We do have building rental fees and field permit fees for the non-youth leagues, and a lot of that goes to, like, unfortunately, the Porta Johns and the Geese Police, et cetera, things that are not in the regular budget, and probably shouldn't be, because the users end up paying for it. It's pretty healthy right now, but this is the time of year when we start spending money. The lifeguards will come on pretty soon, and the expenses will start to kick in there. So I think we're in pretty good shape as far as the revolving fund. My regular budget, there really aren't any changes. We basically level funded. We decreased a couple of areas, that being the maintenance of vehicles and the maintenance of equipment. I always put I put vehicles and equipment together, both in the supplies and the purchase of service, because it seems almost every year something happens either to one of the trucks or pieces of equipment, and for the past number of years we've had $10,000 combined in the purchase of service there, and we've generally spent most of it. This year we had a very good year, and one of the reasons is you bought us some new equipment in the last years. So talking with Barry and Mayor Hero, we thought we could reduce that, which is nice to see that when you did invest in new equipment and new vehicles, we really did reduce what you have to allocate in those line items in our budget. So those are the only two that were really any change. We did ask for an increase in the heating of $1,000, and the reason for that is there's been a lot more meetings over at the Bar Tech Center now. The police are using it quite frequently for meetings, and it's worked out well for them. So we found that the heating bill this year was higher, and obviously, like anyone else, that's contingent upon the price of oil, etc. So.
Necessary evil.
Excuse me?
Necessary evil.
Yes. It's nice to have a little heat.
Yeah.
Dennis, the only question I have about your budget is related to heat and lights and power for this year. Do you think you're going to make it?
Yeah, so the electrical, I think, I looked this morning, I think I have $1,500. And this month, I looked at last year's, and last year it was $1,400 that we paid in June electrical bills. We've paid the May bills already.
You paid your May bills?
We did, and we've turned the heat off in the building, obviously, and we filled up the tank so that we have oil come September.
Anything for Mr. Walsh? All right, we're going to go with Peter and then Vice President Parika.
Just again, thanks, Dennis. We do have the finest recreational facilities, I think, in Massachusetts, bar maybe one of the real rich towns. But, it's a pleasure to go by and see them in the shape they're in and the way they're being used. And particularly, I think the way the residents are taking care of them too has made a difference. Your department has showed that you care, your crew cares, and I think it's run over into the people that use them. The East Side Playground, for instance, always looks great. The people are getting a lot of use out of it, and I don't see any vandalism over there to speak of.
We have had zero vandalism over there.
Well, I think they've taken ownership. You've seen it, Dennis, and when we go over there, it's family orientated, and it's worked out. I hope Angel Park ends up the same way. So if you instill that pride of ownership in the people that use it, usually it works out. And that's the proof is in the pudding over there, because it's definitely worked out.
It's quite an upgrade, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We spent probably the first 10 years upgrading the fields and the fences, et cetera. Now we're getting into the playgrounds, and obviously we make sure they're safe. We do inspections every couple of months, but we're going to be working with the Ariella Foundation to put a new playground in down at Tilda B. Stone. They've already raised $25,000.
Wow.
They lost their daughter. She just passed away in her sleep a year or so ago, and just the family's really made a positive out of it, and it's tremendous. It really is.
All right. Well, Dennis, I want to certainly echo the sentiments of Councilor Blair. I mean, the services are so much more than just playground and ball fields. It's really the services that you and your team provide for the youth across the city, whether it's the 4th of July extravaganza, which I'll be on the grill again. Just the bike parade. I mean, just it gives such a positive spin on the city, and really it gives families something to do. I've heard from several families who have just taken part in some of the programs, and whether it's, someone who's got 4 boys and you're able to help them out with them, whether it's the summer camps or after school, whatever it might be. But, you really you and your entire department have had a huge impact on the city, and we're really lucky to have you here. So thank you for all that you do, sir.
Thank you, and I think it's important to note, one thing that you just touched upon is that any of our programs or activities, we have individuals, corporations, et cetera, that have donated funds either into for Friends of Attleboro Recreation or directly into our donation account that, we're not going to turn anyone away from the pools in the summer or programs that we have. We have ways to make sure that kids get to participate in the various programs we have. And if you go to our website, there's a lot of things to do for free through the rec department in the summer. We have a family fun night where swimming and then over to the Hayward Field for a movie. We have one of the best things I think we've done is implemented Camp Let's Go Play at Ponce and Hewitt, where you can drop your child off from 9 a.m. to noon, no cost for the summer. And if you have to take an elderly parent to an appointment, or you just have something you have to do yourself, you can drop. You'd have to obviously sign in and register the first time, but there's a lot of free programs, and they're listed on our website. And I think that the residents should know that, and hopefully we'll take a look at it.
I think they do, and I think it's as I said, it's quite impactful. And you've been able to touch and help so many families across the city. So, thank you.
Thank you.
As always.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vice President Krika?
Oh, wait a second.
Oh,
I was choked up, so I couldn't talk. Now I'm no longer choked up.
You couldn't talk?
I know.
It's a rare occasion, but it happens.
Where's the gavel? Give me that. I know that you do not like praise heaped upon you. It's something that is well deserving, but of all the departments that we see, everybody takes pride in their work, but the men that work for you, the pride that they take in how the direction that they mow a lawn and the design that they put in it and all of the other things, it just really shows they're examples of the pride for Attleboro, and that's set by leadership. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well said, yes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Dennis.
You two right here.
We kid because we care. We kid because we care.
Well, I didn't say a word.
All right. So, actually, we're running ahead of schedule. If Forestry wants to come on up.
What page? Page 57?
57. No. 57.
Hey, Derek. How's it going?
Hey, Derek.
How are you? How's it going?
Good. How are you? Welcome back.
The snazzy shirt you get on there, Derek.
So, Derek, what we've been doing, I just giving you a chance to introduce yourself. I believe you were down probably 6 weeks ago or so. But still, just anything you want to point or draw our attention to in your budget, anything you think we should know. And then after that, we'll open it up to any questions or concerns that the council and Deb might have.
Okay, well, Derek Corsi, Park and Forestry Superintendent. As far as the budget goes, we're pretty much level funded from last year with a couple cuts made by the mayor. Other than that, it's fairly self-explanatory.
We're on page 57. Do you have any questions?
I mean, it is pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if you want to do, under Park and Forestry, we have the zoo. So
Yeah.
are you doing that separate?
Yeah, I was going to go to the zoo next.
Okay. I honestly, I don't have much. This is Derek's first year. This will be his first full budget.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, he's worked with somebody else's budget coming into the year,
Right.
getting his feet wet. And
Just kind of learning.
yeah, so, I mean, it's a process that we'll have to go through. I think it's important for me to at least let the council know that he's been thoughtful about the new stuff, coming in, asking
Sure.
questions about the procurement process and the Commonwealth. I think recently you sent the letter downstairs because he was able to realize some cost savings and stuff. So
Yep.
those things are always are always happening. At least it appears that way to me.
Sure.
So I thought it's important to point that out. Derek, I think you and Terry have already gone through, but if you could just double check your longevity retirement dates with the retirement system.
Yep.
I think your department said that they had done that, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I spoke with Barry about that, and we have all the dates properly.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, the stuff that I typically am concerned about are heat and that kind of stuff, but you're actually, unless I have the wrong budget, you're actually doing pretty well in that current year to date. So believe it or not, it's not one of the departments that I'm looking at and saying, wow, you ran over last year. I think those are pretty good estimates. Your lights and power even, I mean, they seem to be like on target for the current fiscal year. I think there was some adjustments made in the budget process last year with then Director Walsh.
Yep.
So I think that some of those changes are reflected in the current request and the current activity of the department. So going forward, we'll see how that works out.
Right.
Yep.
Sure. Vice President Parika and then Councilor Blair.
Thank you very much. So I was just, when you said there were only a few areas that have been cut, one of them that kind of stands out to me is the building maintenance line item at 2,500. And sometimes I get, I'm not sure, is that, which building is that for? Is it for, like, is
It's
that,
for-
that's your funding line for all of your buildings? Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
essentially, yes.
So I know that the 2018 was a little bit prior to you, but it was 11,389 last year, and we're dropping it to 2,500. So that kind of, perhaps I could have a pleasant reminder as why it was $11,000 last year.
Oh, because there was a transfer made to do repairs to the Newell shelter,
Okay.
which was an unforeseen repair, and that's where the bulk of the money came from in that because it is considered a building, so that's where it.
I want to just point out that was not a cut off of Derek's requested. That was not one of the, okay, I just want to make sure.
Right.
All right.
Yes. No, that wasn't one of them.
Okay. That's reduction off the revised.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. It's usually those big numbers, though, the ones that jump out at me, and sometimes we need a pleasant reminder as to why that was out of there.
So into this grouping current fiscal year 2018, so I apologize for saying that, sorry.
It's okay.
All right. The council moved just under $24,000 into this grouping. So there was some stuff for the equipment that is going to be moved back. There was for the building maintenance that the superintendent just spoke about. So there was quite a bit of activity coming in that wasn't in the original budget. So the way that the budget book displays the revised budget shows you the increases through the course of the year.
And the only other area that I see where you requested was reduced was supply grounds. Do you have the expectation that will cover you for the year?
We'll try and make it work.
Somebody in the background doesn't seem that way, actually.
Yeah, if we need it, you'll be hearing from me, but we'll try to make it work.
I mean, if it's something that, last year's request was for $15,000.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to stay at 15 because we'd be able to do more things in the park to keep them looking as nice. But, if we have to make some cuts and find some ways to make it work, we can do that.
Okay. And just one last thing. Over the course of the weekend, we were in Capron Park with the parade go through. We were here at City Hall Plaza. You and your crew have done a terrific job maintaining the grounds. Everything looked really beautiful. So thank you for that.
It's more the crew than me.
It's a team effort. So thank you very much. And I see you out there mulching and doing things like that. So it's you too.
Councilor Blair and then Councilor
That's what I was just going to ask, Heather. I thought he had a twin.
Every
time I see a crew working, there's a guy just like him. He's either got a rake in his hand or shoveling mulch.
They're a little short-handed, so we got to make sure things get done.
We hired two or what?
It goes a long way.
Well,
no, it's nice to see it. I'm sure the crew appreciates it, and it is work together, get things done type thing.
Exactly.
Thank you for participating.
And as for a leader to roll up their sleeves and get just as dirty,
Makes a difference.
it's excellent. It's good leadership.
Goes a long way. Councilor Dolan.
It does make a difference because I actually met one of your guys today that was in my neighborhood, and he was very nice, and they spoke very highly of you, and he said exactly the same thing about him picking up a shovel and raking and mulching and doing everything. So it does matter to the people that work for you, because that was one of the first things he said, and they spoke very highly of you. So.
It's always good to hear.
Yeah, being you, it is. It's good.
I'm sure they'll hate me eventually, but.
It's the line between love and hate.
It's a Ferris wheel. One day you're up, the next day you're down.
Do you want to move on to the zoo?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The what? Oh, yeah, that's the one thing we have on the last line item here. Memberships and dues, account number 573010. We originally budgeted for $125, but the price actually went up $10 after I submitted the budget. I'd like to see if we could change that to $135, just to cover the cost.
Okay. So
We're cutting it from Barry's budget.
Of course you are.
So, Commonwealth, so it could be a recommendation, but
Yeah.
that would still have to go through the process upstairs to come down.
Okay.
And so, I know sometimes people say $10, really? It's important for me and for the city, for everybody to know how much it truly costs to run a department. So, that really would have to happen. I know people sometimes say, really, you know what I mean? But there are a lot of, you have a lot of department heads and employees in the city, both city and school side, right? That, oh, I'll just pick that up and pay for it. Well, not everybody can always afford to do that in departments. So departments are told, look, if it's a city expense, it really needs to go through the general ledger. You need to make sure you have the appropriate funds, needs to be in the right account and that kind of stuff, so.
Don't pay
Well, you
for
can
it.
make the recommendation, it will come downstairs, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the issues was Sonny ended up getting the senior discount for these dues, and
Yeah.
I can't take advantage of that, unfortunately.
No pun intended, you're not grandfathered in.
I didn't know that he had a discount.
So, yeah, they have a
amazing.
senior
I love
discount for it.
But it
Only
happens
Sonny.
a lot, that there's changes in those
sure.
small incremental costs, and it's important for them to be properly accounted for.
Absolutely. All right, zoo starts on page 60, but it looks like the bulk of it's on 61.
So the zoo would be in a revolving fund.
Which was handed out today.
Hey, Brandon.
Everyone has a copy of it? Thank you, Deb, for being
It was in
so...
the folder. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's the same thing, right?
No.
It says revolving funds.
There's a specific one for zoo.
Right. It should actually be very close, but the ones that were in the manila folder were printed today. So if there was any activity, they're highly likely to be, if not exactly the same, very similar.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Would you like to take a second to introduce yourself to the council and... Great.
My name's Brenda Young, I'm the Assistant Director at Cape and Park Zoo.
Nice. Thanks for coming down, Brenda. Excuse me. So same thing, Derek, I don't know if there's anything in here you want to draw our attention to and discuss?
Yeah, actually, with the salary and wages, it looks like, the funds went up a substantial amount. That's because last year we didn't factor in the full-time vet when we came up with the numbers. This year we are factoring in that, so that's why there's such a substantial jump in that. That's the big, number that pops out on the page.
Yep, Vice President Parika?
Perhaps, so one of the confusing things about the revolving fund for Cape and Park Zoo is that most of everything is funded from the revolving fund with the exception of 8 salaries, would that be correct? That are funded city side?
Correct.
And there is and we also have a restriction on how much they can spend every year. That's correct, right? We have that coming.
President Cooper?
Councilor, were you done?
Please, I'll come back around.
Okay, sorry.
No,
It's just in me.
that's fine.
So the dollar amount on the city side salaries for Cape and Park Zoo, do you have that?
That's actually included in the Parks and Forestry budget.
Does it call it out specifically for the zoo?
No, it's all lumped into one salary structure.
So Mark, what are you're asking for the salaries for the zoo employees who are covered under the revolving fund?
No, other way around, covered city side.
City side.
So on the city side, on your salary sheet for park and forestry, you'll see, let me know when you get to it, but you'll see under the FY19 salary column, you'll see those employees that are funded under zoo through the revolving fund. It says revolving fund next to where their total would be. And then all the rest of them that are carried in the general government, the dollar figures are there.
Okay, getting there.
Do you have a page number on that?
It's on your salary sheets, Heather. It's towards the far end before you get to schools.
Oh, I got it.
So, I see 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's really 6.5 employees that are funded through the revolving fund.
6.5 salaries. Okay, so.
Really 6, I guess, because we have two 50%ers. So if you're looking at the salary sheet, Mark, you'll see, for example, the zoo director.
Right.
No dollar figure, it's revolving fund, 100%. And that's the same for the first 3 employees on that salary sheet. The rest of those employees, until you get to Fernandez, I think.
Briggs.
Or Briggs. Those are all general government supplied salaries. Then you go to a revolving fund salary, then you go to a half of a revolving and general government, and then revolving fund.
Okay.
Their rates are there, though.
Yeah, I see that 50% from the revolving fund.
Right, but they're also, their weekly rates are there as well.
Okay. My calculator, sorry.
Sure.
Well, you can.
All right. Vice President Preeta?
So when I was looking, so one of the things that I find challenging, especially when it comes to salary sheets, is looking from one year to the next year and how things have changed and things like that. So I noticed that there had been a vacant position for a caretaker laborer or something last year, and that now was that filled, or has that been removed from this particular salary sheet?
So are you under the zoo category? You under
Correct.
park?
Yep. No, under zoo. So
Yeah,
in 2018, there was a vacancy in that line item.
Yes,
We hired Andrew.
that's correct.
And Bradley was full revolving, wasn't he?
It looks like the last hire was in July 2017.
Oh, that was the vet we hired.
Right.
It's a position.
There
There might have
was
been a vacancy, but I think it was funded.
Yeah, it was a funded vacancy, but there
Yes.
was, so did we fill that position, or was that removed from the this particular budget?
No, so the dollar figures are all the same. In other words, they're fully, the same number of positions in 18, the same number of positions for 19. The people may have changed, where you had a funded position in 18, and the hiring might have taken place later on in 18. But if you look at your salary sheet, the only hiring slash vacancy is the zoo director. All the other positions.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, all the other positions are filled.
So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that last year's budget book had a funded vacant line item, like for a zoo caretaker or whatever. So my question then is, was that position filled for this year?
Yes.
Or was that removed from the budget?
No, there are
from
the
last
same number of employees in
Okay.
the zoo in 18 as there are in 19.
So who was it? Which, like, do you know?
I'd have to look at 18 salary sheet. I don't know.
It's probably the vet. He didn't start until July 1st.
Yes, you're probably right. 2017 is when we hired the vet. So that might have been a funded vacancy.
I'll be right back. Mr. Cooper will ask a couple of questions while I'm gone.
So the vet, I just want to, the vet was a full-time position in
Correct.
19 and was a part-time position in 18?
No, it was full-time.
Full-time for 18.
During the original budget, it wasn't factored in. That's why there's such a jump in salaries. It was factored in as a part-time position in fiscal year 17, yeah.
And then, so.
Starting July 1st of 2018. So
Right.
This
Became,
fiscal year, he was full-time.
and in the budget book as full-time. And that position's completely funded from the revolving fund.
Correct.
But it looks like there's about 400, on quick math, there's about 400, over 400,000 city side to fund the salaries at the zoo. Is that a fair assessment, or am I missing something?
So the 458,000 on your budget page, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. President, would be what is in the general fund. So that 458,641.91, that's isolated to that grouping of zoo,
Yep.
is the amount that is budgeted in the general fund salary and wage line as part of the overall park and forestry budget of 973,000. So the 973,000 is made up of those four subtotals, or five subtotals, excuse me, because the department head has the unique total. So all of those are within the budget. The amount that's in the revolving fund, where it just says REV, revolving fund, that would be, in FY18, the salaries were 389,852. So what you see in front of you, sir, is what is in the budget. So that 458 represents what's being borne by the general fund for the salary costs of the zoo employees out of the park budget under 650.
Okay.
Does that
Yes.
answer the question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks.
So to the, what's this, can I see a revolving fund sheet, this one? What's the expenditure limit on the revolving fund, and is there any capacity there to take more from the revolving fund than city side?
So, as presented, I believe it's $1.5 million, I believe is what is presented for the council,
For the cap?
the cap.
Yeah.
So I think what's available is, I need to make sure I caution everybody as it relates to salaries out of revolving funds, because the statute and the ordinance both require that you actually have to have the cash in the revolving fund in order to make a payment. So if there was going to be a shift to the revolving fund, I would just caution everybody to make it prudent and be cautious, because not only does the salary have to go, but the fringe has to go with it. And it's the proportionate share. So for example, on all of these employees that you see that are paid 100% from the revolving fund, 100% of their fringe goes with them. So if that particular employee has a health insurance plan, the revolving fund absorbs an equal percentage of the fringe associated with the health insurance plan. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
But, so, I get that piece, and I know you would caution us when we made it, if we were making what you didn't think was a wise decision around the revolving fund, but it looks to me like the current balance is 1.1 million,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
I'm just trying to make sense of the 458,000 city side. If we have 1.1 million in there, and we can spend up to 1.5, but we're only
So let's talk about that for a minute, if you'd like to, sir, because the revolving fund packet that you have in front of you, your total expenses paid out year to date is the $983,777. The revenue collected year to date from July of last calendar year through to date is the $753. So the reason it looks like you have available $1.185 million is because that takes into consideration how much money rolled over from the previous year, which on the year-to-date budget report in front of me, it shows at the $1.7 million. 1.712. Okay, so that's how much money came into the revolving fund at the end of fiscal 2017. And then you have the revenue of 753 coming in, the year-to-date expenditures of 983 going out. The revolving fund for the zoo is somewhat seasonal in nature. If you have beautiful April vacations, you make boatloads of money with activity coming in through the door. If it's snowing in April, well, I mean, correct me if I'm speaking out of turn, but that type of thing dramatically impacts the revenue stream of a revolving fund of this nature.
What was the year-to-date expenses? I have 1.280.
I have 2.3. Hold on, Barry. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right report, because mine might be isolated to, it is. I don't have a grand total. No. I have 983 and 296 in encumbered.
Okay, so my actual revenue matches yours of 753,502, but I have total expenses, and I might be picking up the encumbrances as well of 1.280.
Did you get to available 1,185,000?
No, well, the delta between those two is 526. So the delta between the revenue year-to-date and expenses year-to-date is 526.
Hold on, I have multiple printouts, Barry. Let me double check.
Okay.
I don't want to give you the wrong information.
But I have the same carryover that you do, 1.712. So it might just be a different report that.
Printed today.
Yeah, I did too.
I have total expenses year to date 983, and you said you had what?
1.280.
That's close if you do.
If you include
expenses
the
and
encumbrances.
Yeah.
It's 1.279.
Yeah, so I think I picked up the encumbrances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to the discussion, that is a planned expense by the department, right?
That's why it's encumbered.
$296,000 of encumbrances that have not been expended yet, but they have signed purchase orders for it. They have rather large capital that they looked at this year, I believe, right? Which is because they were able to build up the funds to get to the point where they could have some capital. They have the rainforest building this year. It's $148,800 that this revolving fund is absorbing.
Right, if that carryover starts now to be shifted towards recurring salaries, you're not gonna have that kind of a carryover from year to year, and therefore, you're not gonna have that ability to do the capital projects.
I guess my only question is, do we need to carry 1.7 million? Yes, we need to fund, but our expenditure limit is 1.5 million. I don't know what historically we've carried over, but my ask very specifically would be that we, and I know you do this, but it just, you know, we have 1.7 million that we carried over. We have a $1.5 million expenditure limit. We can only spend that even if, whether we do rainforest or not, or something like that. Can we evaluate or look at where we could potentially move some of these additional salaries to the revolving fund? Because that was the original goal, or that's what I've been hearing for.
Well, and that's what we've been doing. I mean, over the
Mm-hmm.
past several years, we've shifted the zoo director 100% to revolving. I think the vet full-time shifted to the revolving. So it's not something I would recommend we put immediately everything onto the revolving fund, but so we do look at it, we do analyze it, and we do slowly shift things over there, but that's usually coupled with something of a funding source. So when we did the zoo director and we considered the vet, I mean, that was about a little bit after you folks raised the zoo entrance fees, so that was justifiable.
Okay, I would just, and I'll make the recommendation when we send the message that we continue to look at opportunity within the zoo revolving account to move positions where it's appropriate from city side to the revolving fund, especially if this year we carry over a similar number to, 200,000 plus over what you can even spend. And you haven't factored in a thing of what you're gonna get for revenue that year. It's just my opinion. That concludes my comments, thank you.
No, they're good comments, they're the right conversation to have, and President Cooper, I've already got it on my notes to include in the message. Speaking of revenues, as it relates to the revolving fund, 2 years ago?
Yes.
2 years ago, we increased the fees. I think it was fiscal 17. Right? Fiscal 17. Do you see a need, obviously not in this year, but how are those fees? Are they generating the revenue that you feel is sufficient? Are you seeing that there might be a fee hike in the future?
I don't think in the immediate future.
Okay.
I think we're doing, our visitors have adjusted well to it. And
great.
We're planning on implementing some more events and things to get more in, more folks in. Excellent.
That's always been one of the things that people look forward to. I remember the white alligator, the red fox, so that's pretty neat. Thank you. Council Hall?
Yes, so piggybacking off Councilor Cooper saying, President Cooper, excuse me, President Cooper. As we do move those salaries over, and I know this was brought up in the past too, it does cause a little bit of strain, I think, to the budget, correct? If we start moving some of those positions over to you to have to be paid under the revolving fund. So I would just say, be cautious of that when you come back, there's other things to then think about and to make sure that your budget fully reflects all the other costs that you have to have because of that. Because if you looked at the revolving fund in the past and sort of said, okay, we could do a little bit with the revolving fund as the capital projects, and you can't do that anymore as we start doing this, that's fine, that's the way it's supposed to work. But that means you have to fully reflect somewhere else the actual amount to make sure you get the actual amount of things that you need to run the zoo, and don't because I think that happens sometimes, and then we get caught up and then we have to raise the fees and do all that kind of stuff. So does that make sense what I just said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Deb?
I think the point is well made, and I think that everybody, what I'm hearing is that a prudent look at it is probably warranted when you carry over $1.7 million in an operation. So literally at the beginning of the year, they had every cent they needed to operate the entire year with a $200,000 surplus. Amen. That being said, they had some capital projects that they did and stuff like that. So I think it's a philosophical conversation and something that is worthy of note. I really do have to caution. My concern as city auditor is if they don't have money, I can't sign whatever it is, and in this case it would be payroll, right? So that is something that gives me pause to make sure that I at least say it. But I think, unless you look at it, I think it's something fair to look at, like maybe to evaluate. The other thing is and it's tough to say because my historical actual information on the revenue side for the previous years goes through period 13, which is everything. They do look to be slightly down on your revenue for this year. They're having some transition. Everybody's aware of that. Like, there's been some stuff going on over there. So I'm always in favor of taking a look. So if there's any information that you need relative to the revolving fund from my office, this one in particular, please let me know and I'll get that to the council.
Thank you, Deb.
The weather has been an issue.
Yeah.
This
rained
spring
every
and
weekend.
fall.
Yeah.
We actually had better attendance and better revenue in February vacation than we did in April vacation. And that's one of the things I've looked at in the past 3 months where I've been overseeing the zoo. We have been able in the past year, because of our surplus, been able to buy updated equipment for our operations department, which has allowed us to do faster and more efficient renovations of the exhibits. The renovation at the Rainforest that we're doing with that exhibit wouldn't have been possible in the time span and what we wanted to do without the equipment we were able to purchase for that. We've also been looking at different events that we can have during zoo hours, after zoo hours, to bring in more revenue from that aspect as well.
All right. Well, thank you. We've run over time.
So what I would add is continue to, you're both new and interim, continue to explore revenue generating opportunities for the zoo. I can tell you that I went in my position as a city councilor behind the scenes, and I would have paid money. Knowing what I know now and what I was able to see from here to there, from here to you guys, away from Lion, I could feel him breathing on my hand. There are people in this community and outside of it that would pay for that opportunity to see that. And I know this, can't do it every weekend because it stresses out the animals and what have you, but, the opportunity to do those types of things, if I had the opportunity to do it again, I'd pay. So it was pretty amazing. It was great. So those types of things are awesome.
We had that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, well, thank you both for coming down. If any other questions should pop up for the council, please send them to me. I'll send them through Virginia, and we'll get those answered. All right, that was a good discussion to have, so thank you. Keep up the good work.
Do you want to do animal control?
I'm sorry?
Animal control?
Ooh. Is there anything that changes in there? Or?
Yeah, we requested 1,500 more for heating. It's a new building. We're trying to work out the quirks as far as how much it would cost to heat. As you may remember, we asked for an additional $1,000 recently to cover us for the rest of the year.
So I guess I'm full of it tonight because I have a question about animal control.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And heating expense related to that. So, when we built that building, we were told it would be cheaper to maintain, right? And we heard that when we built the high school. So all I'm going to say is I hope that the same thing doesn't prove true in the high school that we're showing here, because it's costing us more. I know it's bigger, I know it's better, I know it's whatever, but the bottom line is, people stood there and said it's going to cost us less to run this new building, when in fact it's costing us more, right? You just asked for 1,000 and you're asking for 15 this year, so it's a cause for concern when we make statements like that and then they don't come true. Not that we were being untruthful when we said it, but the bottom line is, it's demonstrated heating costs are more.
Well, I know most of the cost jump was due to natural gas. I don't know if there was, because there was a change to Columbia with the two different services, that might have had something to do with the rise in the cost.
Yeah, and that's something, this has been a common theme throughout these budget hearings, that, and Deb has pointed it out. Again, it's a moving target. One, it's New England. We don't know what the weather is. We don't know what the rates are going to be. However, to President Cooper's point, I think we need to be a little more conservative when we are factoring in, as conservative as we can.
Yeah.
So, and, if you want to just forward it through, because we kind of took a little more time. I was a little more lenient than I wanted to be with the revolving account conversation. If there's any other questions for animal control, is there anything else that really, because everything else looks
Everything else is straight across the board.
Straight across the board from last year for the most part. Briefly, quickly.
So just I'm looking at your salary sheet, and there is a vacant position that is unfunded. How are we doing with our overtime?
I'm sorry.
For animal control?
Yeah, I know the callback overtime we were running a little low on. We had to, move some money around. But of course, callback, you can't predict it.
Right.
With two people in the department, it is what it is, really.
So year-to-date callback is 8,400. FY17 actual was 9,000. FY18 was 8,500. We bumped it up to 10,500. I get 8,400 right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Derek, thank you. All right. Almost 10 minutes late. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. Library, on page 53. How are you? I think Derek Handel is Grace on the fire.
Good. How are you? Good, thanks.
All right. So, Amy, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
If we would just take a second, introduce yourselves to the council.
Yes, good evening. I'm Charlie Oliver. I'm the president of the trustees of the library.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you.
I appreciate the formality, but no need to stand.
So I'm Amy Rillinger. I'm the interim director. We're 2 weeks out of Joan and 2 weeks before Chris's arrival.
Okay, good. So what we've been doing is just giving you the opportunity to discuss your budget and anything that might stick out to you, anything that you think we should know, and then we'll been opening it up for questions.
Sure.
All right.
It's a very bare bones budget. It's almost the same budget we've had for the last few years. Just tried to level fund as best we could. Charlie, you wanna?
Well, I would certainly want to be on record as standing up for the level of staffing that we have in the library. You need to be aware that our new director is coming into a library that is understaffed at the present time. The fact that we don't have a library director who's working the circulation desk at the moment, it may sound a little absurd, but that if we don't have that person there, we've got a real staffing problem. So you need to know, first of all, that we are understaffed. This year, fiscal year 2018, that's begun to manifest itself in a reduction in state aid because we no longer meet the minimum standards for libraries for populations between 25,000 and 50,000, which is 59 hours of service. You have to be open 6 days a week and a minimum of 59 hours. We now are open 6 days a week and 53 hours because we simply don't have the manpower. That's a sexist term? I don't know. I didn't mean it that way. The people to staff the library to meet those service hours. It cuts into our ability to make programs. It cuts into our ability to find and work on grant applications that we might hand to the friends to go out and raise money for us. It cuts into morale, certainly. Trustees are doing their best to keep everybody smiling. It cuts into another area. We do not receive any municipal appropriation for materials, that being books, databases, other media information, that we are required to expend in order to meet the qualification for state aid. There is a requirement that we spend on materials an amount equal to 2.5% of the average of the last 3 years. It's a complicated formula. The point being, we're dancing closer and closer to the point of actually being decertified. So as we talk about this budget and future budgets, you know, we've seen our staffing come down, come down, come down. Our budgets be level funded, cut, level funded, level funded, cut, level funded. For so many years, I started in the Judy Robbins administration. I joined the board, and it's probably why I have a bald spot on the top of my head now. You know, it's a struggle every year. So while I have nothing specific to add to the budget that's before you and that we need to agree upon tonight, as a trustee, I would be irresponsible if I didn't continue to hammer this home to everyone who's here to listen.
Okay. Before I get you, Council Reynolds, just a couple questions on those points. How many staff, when you're talking about, you know, the impact of hours and potentially impacting certification and accreditation, what is the number of staff you would need? And is it a full-time, part-time mix?
I can't, since I don't live the library every day, please forgive me, I'm a
Ballpark.
trustee. However, I will say that we need sufficient staff in order to put another 9 hours on the books every week for having the library open. That's one thing. Second of all, I would say that because we have so many positions which are important but are part-time, we turn out to be a training ground for other libraries within the sales network who may offer the same position on a full-time basis. So we have a fair amount of turnover that is troublesome to us. As far as specific numbers of how many bodies do we need, I can't speak that language right now, and I'm sure that our director can.
Okay, very good. Council Reynolds and then President Cooper.
So actually, Charlie, I was going to ask the same question. That's what I was wondering. What did we need to add a part-time? How much money would that cost to get somebody on that would break? We had this problem several years back, if I recall, and the same thing happened. We were going to be defunded because we didn't have enough hours. We didn't do, I think it's what did you say, Charlie, 59 hours?
We need 59, we have 53.
We only have 53. And so that did happen several years back, and we did find a way to fund it because just keeps bringing us down to this path once again. And so I guess I would ask, what is that number as far as funding that you would need to get that person on there? And then would the state come back and give you that funding immediately, or do you have to wait a certain amount of time?
There would be at least a year's delay before we would realize the benefit.
Before you realize the benefit.
So I would say a couple of things to that. First of all, we're at, the 11th hour here with the budget. I don't see where there's any possibility that we're going to change the budget. However, I think it's something that you need to be mindful of going forward. We have a new director starting in mid-June, and I would think that she would like to have some say in how that should take place. But I think my reason for speaking out is to make you aware that we're at rock bottom.
We can't keep going.
We can't keep going in that direction. And the library is vital and vibrant. People walk in the door. We keep our statistics and report them every month. We are as busy as ever. Okay. And people need our services. They need that. There are many people in the community, believe it or not, in this day and age who don't have computers, who don't have printers, who don't have Wi-Fi, who don't have things that they depend on from the library. We do a huge variety of programming, which is a huge success. And we have a lot of bodies that walk in the door as a result of the programming that we do. So if you don't have the staff to work the hours, to be on hand when there's a program going on, it begins to cut into that ability as well.
Sure.
So, I don't mean to be here whining.
I don't think it's whining.
Everybody, there's not enough money to go around.
I think you presented in a very matter-of-fact situation. This is what you're facing. It's real. It's real. President Cooper.
Thank you, Charlie or Amy or Barry, whoever is most appropriate to answer. But how much? What was the dollar amount of the reduction in state aid because we didn't have the 59 in 6 days?
It was 12% as a percentage, and that equates to about 7,500 or 8,000 in that vicinity. Approximately correct. And so that impacts the amount of money that we have to spend on materials that we are required to spend. That leans more heavily on our endowment, which we're trying to use for projects which will allow the library to evolve technologically and in terms of upgrades like our children's room or our technology lab, things like that, which help us to step into the 21st century a little more appropriately.
Any other questions? Anything you'd like to add?
We've been brainstorming all the time, Joan and I, on how to add a staff person, part-time, full-time. We know we need someone who's more flexible. as far as the desks that they can cover, the way our staff is staggered, part-timers can only work the circulation desk, that only work the checkout desk, right? And then there's 6 people on our total staff who are qualified to work the reference desk on the 2nd floor. There's a slightly higher number that is qualified to work the children's room desk. It depends on your degree, it depends on union job descriptions, it depends on a number of things. But in the last few weeks, without a director, with me working assistant director and director, with vacations, with 2 people on sick leave, and Charlie is getting the bulk of, we're just trying to keep the doors open.
Right.
And we're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And with a smile on our faces, but on like the tech lab we're creating, book club met in there, and had a tea party to coordinate with their book. 2 hot pots blew a circuit. So we're working really hard to get that up and running, but yeah. And I know this is not a big pro-library rally, but I mean, we're looking at the budget and really
This is your opportunity in front of the council,
seriously.
so take it.
When you come in to talk to one of us, and we're on the circulation desk, I mean, admittedly, sometimes it's planned. Like Joan and I love to cover their breaks so that we can see who's in there, we can keep an eye on what's happening. You don't want to spend all of your day in the office, but when you're working a 4-hour shift, you can imagine the things that are not getting done when we're checking books in and out.
Agreed. Deb.
And I apologize because I didn't print the state aid to library fund, the grant fund here. What is the trustees' plan for that? There's a...
For what, the state aid that's being held at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, well, a good portion of it needs to be used for materials purchases because we don't have a municipal appropriation for materials. So we have to spend some of that, and we have to spend money from the endowments that we have, the investments.
So none of that's I know there was some capital reserve.
So some is being held for the children's room renovation project.
Okay.
For the fees and all that will go forward with that.
And that's in the state aid to library. So your existing budget for 2018, unless you're like the recreation department that filled an oil tank and isn't expecting another delivery, are you going to be able to make it, or are you going to have to? No, you're on gas, right? Public library's on gas. So are you going to make it in that account for the year? Is the plan to charge that expense someplace else? Looks to me like you only have $184 left. I mean, you have potentially some in the lights and power that you might be able to move, or?
Depending on the weather, and it does fluctuate a little bit, but we're budgeted for pretty, average numbers, and we've been okay the last few years. It's a pretty accurate reflection.
For your lights and power, and you're not concerned about heat?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any additional heat bills, or because you have $184 left, so you're going to have to move money within your budget potentially?
I don't have anything waiting at the moment. I can certainly follow up with you on that.
You've paid 11 bills. So just to point out to the council, it's one of those line items that they might have to move money within their budget to meet their existing obligations. And given the information that was just shared from the department, I just wanted to make sure to look. 610. Doom and gloom.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think it's a reality. So we're working with a budget for a city. So, I don't look at this as being doom and gloom. This is the reality of the world of which we're facing, of which we're asking our department heads to be able to provide a certain level of services to the residents of the city. So these conversations, especially the ones we're having tonight, they're not always going to be easy. And some of it's going to be hard for us to hear, and some of it's going to be hard for the department heads to hear. Might be hard for the administration to hear. That's what this whole process is about. Council Hall.
And given that, as we hear these things and we hear these multiple times from multiple departments, the first thing that should be said in our head is, we should be looking at some other fund that needs to be protected, if you would, should these things happen. So we need to make sure that there is a pot to go to at some point in time when these things do start coming in, and that we don't disturb that at some point in time.
Yeah, and we had certain, we have the reserve fund for transfer, and we talked a lot about that, and seriously, the department heads have been great about being able to transfer from different surpluses they have in their line items. So we want to make sure that, just continue to keep the lines of communication open. Dick, thank you for your comments. It's certainly something we can put into the budget message, because you're right, I think, just given the timing where we are now, that might be a pretty tall order. But we can look at it going forward. So thank you for coming down. We're really off schedule right now. If it's something, feel free to just send it and we can send it in. Thank you, though, Diana. All right, thank you both for coming down.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the city assessor on page 11.
We'll put you right back on schedule.
I figured as much, Stanley. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Good evening, counselors.
What we've been doing is just giving you a chance to introduce yourself. I think you've been down enough and you've gotten to know the council. But then just anything that sticks out in your budget, anything you want to let us know, anything we should be looking at, and then we'll just open it up for questions.
Is there anything that sticks out in my budget that's a problem? No.
Anything at all?
Nothing whatsoever.
Okay, very good.
I mean, it's basically level funded. There's been a few items that have been reduced, and which has been normal. There's nothing out of line. The only increases that you might see in there has to do with, either be it step changes or salary increases. That's all I can really say. That it's nothing. There's no new employees. There's no new items. There is one increase which you might notice versus a prior year that had to do with GIS, which in the case of GIS, there is an increase in our GIS funds, but as many of you might know, the assessing office has taken over the website or the universal cost of the GIS and the updates be it for planning, building, because we had an internal GIS as you prior saw.
Yep.
So there's a $5,000.
$5,000.
Yep.
Yep.
That's it.
Well, the other thing that's important to point out is that unlike prior years, the revaluation was actually funded in the operating budget. What we used to do is recognize that would be an expense and then fund it through the reserve fund transfer once the budget was approved. So that's a major difference.
Councilor Corbett and President Cooper.
So my question was just about the GIS changes and the increases. From my understanding, that was consolidated from, I forget what the other department was, but consolidated into the assessor's office.
Yes.
And then it was only actually a $500 increase or
$5,000.
$5,000 increase.
But total to the hit to the city was only roughly 500 from consolidating, because I forget where.
But you probably went and looked at it on their MIS. There's a line under the berries. There was a line. There would be a decrease in there, and that the expense went. There were two GIS systems going on. The one that was operating out of the assessor's office was up to date, far more efficient. Was with I'll say Cartographics. They now have a different name, but that's who we were operating. And there was the other one was with CDM. Ours was more up to date, had more layers, and so we made it more universal to.
Will the public now have access to that information? I know when I tried to pull the data from state, it was there was a fair amount of information.
Are you supposed to be doing that stuff? Just messing with you. No, absolutely. What we're going to do, it will become a public website in the sense of once we clear out all the bugs internal, then there are going to be certain layers that are going to be kept internal to the city. There are certain layers that we want to keep for our own, but as far as going on there, soon you'll be able to see your property, see your house, see your, you'll also get the which, you know, you also get the Google is by far better than what we'll have for the GIS or so forth, but we will have all those layers that are not internal sensitive. Like, we're not going to put out there zoning layers. We're not going to put out there certain things in for a butters list and so forth. We're not putting all that information, but it will be an external website as well. So it's right now.
Conversation for another time, but I would question why not. But
yeah, I think the GIS.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, we're not going to put out on the website. Right now, we're running about 48 layers internal. Us to host that 48 layers out external is too massive. I mean, granted, if a counselor came in here and asked us for their own internal password, I'd grant it. I mean, for that, like we've talked on other subjects. No, that's not a problem.
Right.
You're part of the city.
Right. Thank you. President Cooper, you had a question?
Sure. So back to reeval, it was Stanley. I think you requested 20, and you sent down 15. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, well, we agreed upon on that. What will happen is if we need at a later date, we know that last year it went through at, I think, $19,500 for the maintenance. We put out the $15,000 knowing that we were going to get started on it if we're out for quotes right now. Okay. We don't have the actual numbers, so we know that it might be something different, and we'll make up the difference at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deb, anything?
I just wanted to point out to the council that the assessor's office is the office that does a couple of important things relative to the budget in addition to their regular work. The allowance for overlay, which was talked about a couple of weeks ago, and that's where the senior tax abatement program is charged along with all of the other statutorily required items. And in addition to that, the assessor's office does the growth estimate in the budget. So the growth estimate is here, and that won't come out until the fall. And the assessor's office is one of the offices that the treasurer's office, collector, MIS, clerk's office, my office, budget admin will be working with, obviously, for the setting up the tax rate, and it will include the first debt exclusion that everybody's very familiar with. So Stan and I have spoken previously about we wanted to try to do things a little bit earlier in the process as much as possible, and knowing that it's a lift for that office to get the stuff underway, but that is going to come out. The debt exclusion stuff will be something that we'll probably have to revisit because of the $30,000 estimate that's in the budget.
Yep.
So. I just need to keep hammering that home because it's something new for us. So like there might be something that like as we work our way through the process that we need to bring to your attention on short notice.
Good.
Could I, with that in mind, you touched on something I do want to ask. I mean, I don't know whose committee it's in. Just we came down. It will help us in the assessing office. There's I believe there's 2 articles in front of you. One has to do with the seniors. Or we talked about it, you might say, and one that we talked about changing the personal property to $10,000, the exemption for $10,000. I would like to ask that if time is possible before the end of this fiscal year, which it may not be, that it would be moved, because when I do the preliminary bills,
yep.
And I know I'm deviating from the budgetaries, and thank you, if you could move it out, because we're going to issue those bills, and then what if you pass it later on for this fiscal year, we're going to have to roll all those bills back and refund them.
Sure.
That will come out of the overlay. If you don't do it now, and then we issue the bill, then we got to refund it, and that'll come out of the overlay. And that could be, I mean, it may not be substantial, but it's duplication of services.
Of course.
Okay.
Good. President Cooper.
Just a quick point to that. I think there's 2 pieces of business that you mentioned. One is the personal property, and then the other is the senior exemptions. I think the senior exemptions will take a little longer. The mayor's well aware. We've had a few meetings about it. The 10,000, the increase to 10,000.
And that is that.
Yeah, I think. Council Hall asked the mayor to come down, him and you to come down, so we can sort that out.
That's perfectly fine, because we don't issue that money, those monies, until the third and fourth quarter. So you've got the rest, as long as when you write it, it's retroactive to fiscal year 2019. That's all you want to say with that one, all right? And the same is true with personal property. You want to make it active to fiscal year 2019. That's the one where, but the one that's hard on my mind is I hate to issue those bills and then we have to retract and refund that out of the overlay.
Very good. Well, Stanley, thank you for coming down.
That's it?
That's it. Told you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure was ours, as always.
Take care. Have a
All
great
right,
evening.
thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Now we're going to bring us home for the year, we're going to have Chief Kyle Hegney of the police, which is on page 25. Chief, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Good, thanks. Good evening. Before we get started, I just want to take a second. Would be remiss if I didn't recognize the ceremony that was held yesterday morning for the fallen police officer. 50 years to have his family so calm, and I think it sent a pretty powerful message to the family and the community that you guys never forget one of your own. So really powerful, powerful stuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Chief, what we're doing is we're giving all the department heads the opportunity to come down, introduce yourself if you don't know any of the newer counselors, as well as talk a little bit about your budget, what's in there that you think we need to know about, anything that you want to draw our attention to, and then after that, we'll open it up to Deb Gould and the council for any questions we may have.
All right, great. Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Good evening. As you know, the police union settled their contract, so they're entitled to their percentage raise and other various items that they settled upon with the city in their police union contract. So the salary sheets will reflect that percentage increase that was settled and subsequently sent down to the city council for this honorable body's vote. So that's why you'll see a big jump in, I shouldn't say a big jump, but a jump in the original FY18 to the recommended FY19. That reflects those raises. So a lot of the, I'd probably say 95% of this budget is all personnel expenses, which a lot of it's contractual in the contract. So in fact, 99% of this budget is tied, any increases are tied to a contractual issue, either in the personnel section, service section, or supply section. Everything else is level funded from last year. So you're not going to see any anything major different or request increases. We will, as department heads, we requested to submit a level funded budget, and we did that with the exception of any contractual issues that are attached to whatever line item or associated costs that is in the daily operation of the police department.
President Cooper.
Hi, thank you. I just remind me again for line of duty, you move that money from salary to line of duty as you need it, right?
Also military.
Okay, perfect.
So line of duty is when an officer is hurt in the line of duty. His salary needs to be paid out of the line of duty injury account. And also military, if they're deployed active duty military, they also have to be paid out of that account. They can't be paid out of the regular budgetary salary account.
And then I just have to sort of publicly laugh about your building maintenance, $10,000, right? It sort of gives me a little internal chuckle.
Well, you'll see throughout the year I send a lot of memos down, and it has to do with building maintenance, repairing AC units, repairing the garage out back. I think recently just came down.
Cell doors.
I think there's one down tonight regarding the 911 server room. The AC went in there. In that server room, which obviously if the servers overheat, you know that, Todd, you lose the servers, you lose the computers, and in this day and age, if you lose your computer, the world comes to an end.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
So, $10,000, thank you for recognizing that, but So that's why you'll see a lot of memos from me as the chief and the police department regarding fixing items throughout the building. Because historically, I think the last maybe 8-9 years, that's been at $10,000. And inflation has not remained at $10,000.
No, it hasn't.
Just a follow-up to that, I haven't been in there since the last snowstorm, but it was the kitchen was obvious to me when I was there, and I did speak to the mayor about that in our weekly meetings. And so, you know, you don't have to do it tonight, but you know, if it hasn't been fixed, I'm here to advocate for something to be done with that, whatever your plan is. I'm happy to talk about it another time, but.
The mayor's been very working with us. He's been fantastic about getting quotes and having that fixed for the officers. He recognized it as a major problem also, so he's been very helpful in securing the backing of sending a letter down to this honorable body to repair that kitchenette, which is deplorable.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Cobus and then Councilor Blair.
Thank you. The one question I had was regarding the professional training, line 515040. One of the things I was struck by when I went for the tour of the police station and we talked for a while was how much training you do on a continual basis, and it was impressed by it. So I don't have a concern with that, but where it's increased by 30,000 from over what was spent last year, I was just wondering if you could talk to that. And what is that a one-time, or is that, what is
so
that?
You're in is it academy tuition or tuition and books?
I think it's professional services.
Professional services.
It's up in your personnel section.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I absolutely can explain it. I didn't know. When you said training, so that's the FTO stipend. So that's a contractual issue. We're going to have 10 police officers attend the academy. A negotiated item that's been in the contract for several years is that when an officer is conducting a field training officer program with a new recruit that comes out of the academy, he has to ride with an officer for 6 months. There's an associated stipend to conduct that training. So, it's just a simple mathematical formula.
And there's 10 new police officers coming in, so that's where that comes from.
Right, that's why that number in next year, that hopefully we don't have to send anybody to the police academy, and that number will be at 0. So it's depending on who we send to the academy. So, and that's a contractual item, so.
Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Deb?
No. Hello.
Get ready.
Well, I've talked to these two gentlemen today, so they know what's coming. So the chief mentioned that there's the contract is before the council to be voted. Inside that contract are Barry, we talked about this last week in citywide, that Barry funded for the salaries for this budget, this one department, I believe is the only departmental budget that reflects the anticipated change, because those were the contracts that were done before Barry was able to submit the budget. So while the majority of that is funded here, there are some line items that are not, because obviously because I looked through, I could see it, but in addition, I had to create new general ledger account numbers. So they don't even appear anywhere in your budget as a 0. So some new stipends that are included in the collective bargaining, and those weren't huge in, cost items, but the one item that is a little bit substantial is the uniform cleaning. That is a professional service line that is not reflected in the budget before you, and is not something that I believe the chief could absorb in his existing professional service classification. So I would expect in the not too distant future, once that contract goes through this process, if that is an affirmative vote, that the chief through the administration would be back to request those funds. Some of the salary stipend things, I believe the chief might be able to address internally, if not throughout the course of fiscal 19, at least in the short term, but I don't imagine the potential contractual obligation for the uniform cleaning could be absorbed for any length of time through the professional service budget of the department.
Right, that's true. So we recognize that those are two items that we're going to have to deal with in FY19, not immediately, but over time. Certainly is the first responder stipend, which I believe is $500 multiplied by 79 officers, and certainly the uniform cleaning that was also negotiated. And I know the chief is actively seeking quotes or prices for that.
Right, 30B is Mass General Law, so we have to abide by how we go about purchasing items and what have you. So I actually got to follow up the auditor. I'm not sure if I have to put out quotes or go out to bid, whatever's in the best interest of for the city to get a better deal, better price, if you will. So.
Right. And just as a follow-up, we can't really do that until we know, and
Right.
so it might be a process that is worked out with purchasing to decide, do you want to do 1 year, do you want to bid
Sorry, I said auditor, I meant purchasing.
Do you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? So it's something that we've recently begun discussions about,
Right.
but that is something that would need to be addressed in the budget. Chief, with the 10 new officers, do you have sufficient funds in your tuition and books or the academy in that grouping?
Yes, I suspect 2 officers have hit their potential 80% for retirement, so they could elect to retire any day. So I budgeted 2 academy positions in the budget. The tuition and books is where we send officers to training classes and what have you. I say this every year. The best insurance policy for any police department is training. It's not the actual insurance policy for the city, but it's the training. So if you took the number of officers, the number of reserve officers, the number of auxiliaries, dispatches, if you took that number, which I believe is $48,500, and divided that number by 125 is a healthy number of all the paid staff we have, not including the volunteers. You come up with approximately, I think, $328 per person. I don't have the math, but I know if you did it by 82, that only comes out to, I think, $500.28 per officer, somewhere around there. That training line item absolutely needs to be increased at some point in the future. However, I recognize the budget's up high, so if you guys were to say, give me $100,000 more for training, where are you going to get it from? You know, you're going to take it from the library, you're going to take it from the fire department, you're going to take it, I understand that. So we do the best with what we have to work with and what this honorable body gives us. I'm a hound for free training. I try to go out and get as much free training as possible. We elected to go to a service called policeone.com. I think that service is probably $3,400 a year, and we do 10, 15-minute roll call training videos with a national training company, and we do that every day. We show those videos every day. So that's good quality training that I don't have to come back and say, okay, I'm going to send this guy to this training class and backfill his shift, and that creates overtime, what have you. So I'm trying to think outside the box as much as I can without being a financial burden upon the mayor and the city council. So
those training videos are pretty powerful. I've had the opportunity to watch 1 or 2 of them with you. It's
and they're diverse.
Very
they
diverse.
Go from Alzheimer's to use of force to pursuit driving to
the one we watched was road rage. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, the biggest hot topic now is de-escalation.
Yeah.
De-escalation of incidents is really nationally a very big hot topic button for policing. Because if you think about it, we're trained like to go to the alpha male, if you will, to take the person into custody. We're really over the years we're not tactically trained to withdraw. But this is a new concept,
right?
Because this is policing has certainly changed in my 20 years.
Sure.
I would never think I would have with the day I got out of the academy, if somebody said you're going to have a drug counselor embedded in the police department, I'd look at them like you're crazy. So
certainly has changed
dramatically.
Okay, Councilor Blair, Councilor Holmes, President Cooper. and Deb.
I think you've answered my questions in the last 5 minutes, but I'm concerned that you have enough money to get these officers through the academy and on the street with the proper training. You know, in the past, I've been an advocate of more guys out on the street and being able to intermix with our constituents on a one-to-one basis. You need the presence on the street, I feel. And I was worried that we were going to have 10 recruits, 10 people going to the academy. We were going to be able to finance that through this budget.
We were able to anticipate the retirements, properly fund them in FY18, so the academy tuitions are actually paid out of this budget, and they're starting the police academy Monday.
Very good.
So that's not an expense this council has to worry about, thank God.
We wish them the best. Council Holmes.
I love what you just said. I think that the world is changing and things are evolving, and I like that there's a drug counselor there, and even when we think about schools and safety, it seems like you've really taken a leadership role in that, and I appreciate that.
Can I put a caveat on that?
Sure.
That was paid by a grant, and the grant ran out April 30th. They did not renew that grant. So we are actively looking for a grant, so if anybody on this council knows on how we can seek funds to hire that on a grant funding, we greatly appreciate it, because we think we found a COPS grant that we're going to apply for, and I was speaking to the mayor about it, and he's 100% behind it, which is fantastic. We appreciate his support, because he has certainly recognized the need for it. As I said, this opiate crisis, police are changing, this opiate crisis is not going away anytime soon. And the POP unit does a fantastic job addressing those issues, but it's a 3-man unit, and I'm worried about their burnout. As anybody's in social work, it doesn't, you work 8 hours, but it's not 8 hours.
It's not a 9 to 5 problem.
It consumes your almost life, if you will, so.
And you bring up a really strong point about your grant writing. I mean, the grants that you were able to bring in, and I know Councilor Blair talks about it often, so.
And that grant writer retired.
I know, I know.
So he's gone. So we're doing new and creative things with the best we have, with the resources we have to work with. So we're challenged, but we're going to be all right.
Absolutely. President Cooper.
Thank you. I just want to touch on the revolving funds quick. I fully understand the police replacement of vehicles. I think we've beat that to death over the years, so we won't go there. But the false alarm and the fingerprinting, and if you don't know, you can certainly get back to us, but what expenses within your budget are related to fingerprinting? There's not a lot of money in there, but I see you have about $67,000 in the false alarm. Is there an opportunity to rethink those two revolving funds?
The false alarm account, the money generated this year is kind of an anomaly. That's not going to happen year after year after year, and I can tell you why. With Deb McCacchio's department, it's been fabulous to work with the auditor, Deb's department, and our sergeant named Kevin Blackwell. He's the false alarm coordinator. They've done a fantastic job of going after violators who haven't paid their fines. So we've collected, I would assume, $36,000, I believe. 32,000.
Yeah.
That by their efforts, they were able to bring in all those outstanding fines because of the new system that Deb was able to help us out with. So that's not going to happen every year. Okay. So that number, that's an anomaly. That's only going to happen this fiscal year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to that.
Yeah.
Because the chief and I specifically spoke about this today, because I wanted to make sure that if somebody didn't ask, we brought this to your attention. The current outstanding receivable in the false alarm account, people that we know owe us money, has dramatically dropped. I mean, right now, it's in the vicinity of $12,000, and it's probably even a little bit less than that because some payments have come in and haven't posted. So there was, under the Modernization Act, and what we were able to, limit people getting permits for. So this has been a work in progress for a while. We worked with the police department, the collector's office, The clerk's office actually does some of the collections, so their office is involved in helping. But the the city collector's office, if you have unpaid false alarms and you come in for a permit for something, you're not getting your permit. So that adds a little bit of leverage in order for people to make the payments. But the amount of work that the police department and the collector's office and clerk's office put into this in the last year, if it hadn't been brought up, I would definitely say, because it's a lot. It was a heavy lift. They really did a great job. They get the second notices out and all of that kind of stuff. So, and that's largely Sergeant Blackwell and the other officers.
We were in a I was the alarm administrator back in the day, and we were in a very vicarious situation because I don't think police officers should be responsible for collecting fines. I think it probably creates more issues than it solves, because a police officer going to collect somebody's outstanding fines and that person doesn't pay, and all of a sudden, a week later they get a speeding ticket. Well, why are they getting a speeding ticket? Why, the officer knocked on my door looking for my fines, and so it could raise some ethical issues too. So with this new system, it's more efficient, more effective, and there's a lot of good quality teamwork that's going on between the departments, and it alleviates us from that vicarious situation of a police officer collecting outstanding fines.
Absolutely. And we've seen that a lot over the last couple of years is the cooperation amongst departments. So, but I think you're right. I think it's all about perception these days. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
You're right.
Councilor Hall.
Yes. I just want to make a comment as we go through, and we've spoke about this before. When we do our host community agreements, that's some of this direct relationships with combating drugs is supposed to go along with those host community agreements. So keep that in mind. I know that's the mayor's purview to do that, but I'll ask, keep that in mind. That those dollars with the host community agreement are targeted to the right place. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Anything else for the chief?
Deb. Wanted to answer, I think the second question that President Cooper asked was related to the police fingerprinting. That revolving fund, we are still working out the administrative pieces to how to pay the Commonwealth their share. So it's not a significant amount of revenue that has come in to this fund, but you'll notice that year-to-date there aren't any expenses. That's not because we don't want to pay our bills, it's because there's some administrative, I mean, it's...
That's not our full amount. That some money has to go to the state there, so that number doesn't represent what the city is responsible for, I guess you could say, Deb.
Yeah, so the transfer into this fund wasn't an agency account. This particular revolving fund was created under the new ordinance for fiscal 2018, and some processes with the Commonwealth and trying to figure out how we're going to pay stuff is lengthy.
And interesting.
Yeah.
This was new to the Commonwealth.
Right.
And so it's, in my opinion, and anecdotally, I don't know if this is true, one department wasn't really talking to the other department. So the way they collect local municipal fees for firearm licensing is pretty easy. It's a simplified process. For whatever reason, they didn't copy that process when they instituted this new law for the fingerprinting. So government being government, it seems like it's just a interesting process.
Exercise to do it all again.
So we're trying. So Deb and I are constantly in conversation as trying to figure this out, how the state wants it, and we're confident we're going to get it done.
Sure, it's brand new. It's a year, so good. Any other questions, thoughts? All right, well, Chief, thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And guys, that concludes the budget hearings. But before Barry runs away, I just want to thank you for your help over the last several weeks as we go through these hearings. Being my first time as chair, I certainly appreciate the information that you brought forward, your partnership and willingness to help. So thank you very much.
Happy to help, and again, door's always open. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
And
got some questions, all right, good.
I would like to thank Chairperson, what's your last name? Delicio.
This is my 5th budget season, and not to cast aspersions on any former budget chair, I think this was the smoothest process we've ever gone through. I think that the consistency in meeting times, the consistency, like with you keeping people on track and shaping.
Sorry about that.
No. That's exactly what needed to happen. I'm actually envious of our new counselors because they haven't had to sit through other circumstances that we've had to sit through before. I'd also like to take a moment and thank Deb too. But I won't do that because somebody else might say something about that. But I just wanted to say thank you because this was actually an enjoyable experience for me as opposed to ridiculously torturous. So thank you.
Well, no, and it doesn't happen without all the questions, the comments, the input from each and every one of you. So I appreciate everything. They were very well attended. So, I appreciate that. But Deb, and I'll give you the chance too. I really want to thank Deb though, because Deb came down with understanding that there were things that weren't in the budget book that we need to understand, that we needed to be made aware of. She made sure that we had all of the revolving funds at our disposal, so we could be able to discuss those as well. Deb, it's been wonderful just having you here, just being able to, because you look at things through a little bit of a different lens than the rest of us do, and it's greatly appreciated. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I actually found it very interesting. It's always, I don't get to see all of the colleagues, especially from the outer buildings all the time. So I did learn some stuff. So we had 2 revolving funds we didn't talk about tonight.
Oh.
So I'll leave them for you for tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
And again, to echo what Barry said, if there's some question or something that you have that you think that my office can be helpful with, reach out and we'll do whatever we can to answer you as quickly as possible. So anything that we can help.
Awesome.
Right?
Councilor Preca.
Nice job, Deb. Thanks. I haven't been down here for the budget stuff in a while. I really did find it interesting, and I think that it's been a lot of hard work. And as I said to the budget committee last week, when it was just the committee, I'm like, I'm not sitting here cutting and saying, these are tight budgets. You have really good department heads that do what they can to make it work. There are a lot of limited resources between staffing and money and all that other stuff, but really, I think the department heads work really hard and do try across the board. Unrelated, but slightly to the budget, I just want to clarify something that I misspoke of 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So I know that you're going to see the sidewalk stabilization memo.
Yes.
When the school was here, I indicated that they would be able to use their stabilization fund, their IT stabilization fund. I thought that didn't require a second vote. The city solicitor and I spoke on Friday. It was reclarified today. So you'll see that in the memo. Okay. I will reach out to the school and have them communicate something so that the council can appropriately act on that with a 2/3 vote. So under the Modernization Act, I thought that once you appropriated the money into it under the dedicated revenue stream, that where you dedicated it, they could use that. That's not the case. So we're not in violation because no expenditures have happened, but that's not something that I anticipated having to come before you. So that gives you a little bit more control of the use. But
it's a lot of learning with the Modernization Act. So we will be meeting tomorrow night at 6:30. This is where I'm hoping to vote out all the necessary components of the budget. This is by far the most tedious and most boring meeting of the year. But it's one that if we can get it all done tomorrow night, we should be in good shape to vote the budget. And I'll work with President Cooper exactly when we can do that, but within plenty of time, making sure we're within that 45-day guideline that we all know so well. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn the budget and appropriations at 7:03. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are opposed at 7:03. Thank you all. We are adjourned. 7:03. 6:30. 6:30 tomorrow. Yep. 6:30 a.m.
A.m.?
No, I'm just kidding.
I know, we're just getting warm.
We'll call this council to order at 7:08. Please rise and join me in a salute to our flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Withers, would you kindly read the notice for the first public hearing, the fiscal year 2019 budget?
Notice is hereby given that public hearings will be held by the Attleboro Municipal Council on Tuesday, May 29th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Council Chambers, 77 Park Street, Attleboro, Mass. Relative to the following matters. The first public hearing will be relative to the fiscal year 2019 budget.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the fiscal year 2019 budget? Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to the fiscal year 2019 budget? Anyone to speak neither for nor against for the fiscal 2019 budget? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, would you like to declare that public hearing closed?
I would.
Thank you. That public hearing is closed. Would you kindly read the next notice, Mr.
The next public hearing is relative to the fiscal year 2019 water enterprise budget.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the fiscal year 19 water budget? Anyone to speak in favor of the 19 water budget? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, would you like to close that public hearing?
I would.
Thank you. That public hearing is closed. Would you kindly read the next notice?
Yes, the final public hearing this evening is relative to the fiscal year 2019 wastewater enterprise budget.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone neither for nor against? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, would you like to close that public hearing?
Yes, please.
Thank you. That public hearing is closed. We will move on to the mayor's communication this evening.
May 29, 2018, dear municipal councilors. As expressed in my earlier communication to your honorable body, I believe it is in the best interest of the city of Attleboro to exercise its right of first refusal for the 91.15 acre plus or minus Highland Country Club property. Prior to exercising this right, Mass General Law, Chapter 61B, Section 9, requires that the city first hold a public hearing. Therefore, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 61B, Section 9, I hereby request your honorable body to hold a public hearing on Tuesday, June 19th, 2018.
Thank you. That would refer to Budget and Appropriations Committee, please. And Mr. Chairman, would you like to hold a public hearing on 6/19?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. We'll have a public, no, we'll have the public hearing for that will be on, I think I do have to vote it, June 19th. I think don't I have to vote that?
You have to vote the public hearing, yeah.
By roll call vote? Well, that's what we're going to do. And the roll call vote will begin with Councilor Jackson.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
Mr. Kobus.
Yes.
Vice President Perica.
Yes.
Mr. Delissio.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I don't have a. I'm having a. Ms. Holmes.
No, Dolan.
Ms. Dolan.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Ms. Holmes.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
Yes.
President Cooper.
Yes.
9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes. We will have a public hearing on the 19th, June 19th.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I left my keys at home and I have my whole checklist in my office and I can't get to it.
It's the 5th Tuesday.
Okay, next. I respectfully submit a communication from City Auditor Deborah Gould along with a legal opinion from City Solicitor Lauren Galvin regarding the need to establish a sidewalk stabilization fund. Presently, developers give money to the city for sidewalks in exchange for waivers from sidewalk requirements from the planning board for a proposed development. The city set up and currently has this money in the Sidewalk Donation Fund 2033. The Department of Revenue has taken the position that this type of revenue does not belong in a gift account and that the proper place for the revenue is a special purpose stabilization account. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body take the following steps. Creation of sidewalk stabilization. Motion. Move that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, the city shall establish the Sidewalk Stabilization Fund. 2/3 vote required. Transfer of funds previously received for sidewalks from Sidewalk Donation Fund 2033 to Sidewalk Stabilization Fund. Motion. Move that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, the city shall transfer all funds in the Sidewalk Donation Fund 2033 to the Sidewalk Stabilization Fund established under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B. Majority vote required. Next, sidewalk revenue dedication. Motion, move that the city dedicate 100% of the funds hereafter received from developers for sidewalks to the Sidewalk Stabilization Fund established under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B. 2/3 vote required. Additionally, the vote must take place before July 1st of the fiscal year in which the dedication is to begin. Copies in your packet.
Budget and Appropriations Committee, please.
And finally, tonight on May 3rd, on May 15th, 2018, a communication from Director of Recreation Dennis Walsh was sent to your honorable body regarding the need for funds to replace the lighting fixtures in the Leper Brousseau Gymnasium at the Bartek Recreation Center. Inadvertently, the acceptance of 30 light fixtures with an estimated value of $4,500 from energy wholesalers was omitted from the request. In accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to accept this generous gift to the City of Attleboro. Copies in your packets.
Capital Improvements Committee, please.
Sincerely, Paul Heroux, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned 7:15.
Oh, Laura, sorry.
Look at the copies in your packet.
Sorry.
Oh, you didn't recognize me from the back of my head? Oh, we had like a
What did I say? No, she looked it up.
I just had a mental lapse.
That's all right. I forgive you.
Remember how long we talked about it?
Told me.
I think that's such a great idea.
That's it, right?
Okay, whatever.
Okay.
And just so you
I
know,
just need
it's
some-
electrical wholesalers, and I will be recusing myself.